My pleasure.
Now you can have it.
All right. I'm going to start with something that really touched me last year. I was a speaker. There's a group called the Collective Genius. How many have heard of them? These are people that seriously flip a lot of properties. So maybe there's people there that flip 100. Some of them flip 1,000. Serious people. So I'm the keynote speaker. I go there a few hours early because I've never been to one of their meetings, and I want to get a sense of it. And while I'm there, they have somebody get up that wasn't on the schedule, and he said, I've gotten involved in helping find kids that have been getting abused and help them. So on the spur of the moment, the guy that's in charge of the meeting says, let's raise some money for him. So a couple hundred people in the audience. By a show of fingers, how many $1,000 you are donating? Inside of 8 minutes, $340,000 was raised. I was stunned. When I got up to speak, changed my whole opening because, you know, what I witnessed here, this meeting's no longer about real estate. It's about creating heroes. That's what you guys are doing here, is you're creating heroes. My whole goal for me being a real estate investor was to be my family's hero, the go-to person that could answer the problems of my clan. Not a burden, a privilege. And that's what I got to saw those guys do that night. Take this business seriously. It can take you places that you can't imagine, and I don't know any other way to get there but this business. I'm going to go through my own journey because maybe you can relate to it. And the name of the talk is actually An Unexpected Journey. I was not raised by a dad that had a business or real estate background, a hard worker, and he worked for a company, and his idea was, you know, you're supposed to stay there, and it's not the path I followed. But I didn't follow a good path for a while. I got married at 17, and I developed an attitude, and I got rewarded by getting fired 5 times in a row. So you can imagine, every time I came home with cash, it was severance pay. So if my wife saw cash in my hands, it's like, oh, not again. So that was my start. I got fired all the time. And getting married at 17, I was over my head for a long time. Imagine, oh, by the way, I was the son-in-law that couldn't keep a job, so my father-in-law had me scheduled to go to work for Steelcase, which at the time I think was in Orange County. And I went there to see what my job was on the starting Monday. And my job was to take this steel rod that was like 6 inches long and do this 3,000 times a day. That was my new life. It's probably hard to screw that up, right? And so that's where I was at. Fortunately, I got hired by there's a hardware store, since I'm in Orange, in the area. Anybody ever hear of a Clark Dye Hardware in Santa Ana? It was like the store. It was an industrial hardware store where people came there for everything under the sun and large quantities. Like if you wanted to get skill saw, you needed 50 of them, no problem. They didn't have them in the store. They had them in a house. They had like 12 houses all over the neighborhood with extra stock. I don't know anything about hardware. Why that guy hired me? My resume said I got fired 5 times in a row. Yeah, you can come to work here. I don't know anything. First day somebody asked me, where are the wood drill bits? You know what I said? I said, I don't think they make them out of wood anymore. He had a good laugh because he thought, no one can be that stupid. And I thought I was expounding on my intelligence. I was like, oh. So every day I sent my lunch in the car looking for want ads because I knew I wasn't going to last. Well, this guy would not fire me. His name was Harold Pomeroy. Harold Pomeroy was the manager of this store. And I had developed an attitude. I figured, okay, I'm going to get fired, so I'm not going to try hard. How's that for a good start? Well, that was my pace was slow. He chewed me out every day. And one day, he said something that changed my life. He said, I don't get it. You come to work every day and you let your family down. That flicked the switch in me that has never gone out. And I learned later I could borrow that feeling and plug it in anywhere I wanted. But I got pissed off. And that's when I'm at my best. When I'm there, I'm undefeated. That's how I feel. So I said, okay, Mr. Pomeroy, I'm going to work harder than anybody you've ever seen. Just make it worth my while. So then I was screaming around that store. I really was. It was noticeably different. When you saw me work, it was like, dang, what the heck he's doing? Well, you know what? I've learned, sometimes, how many of you guys own businesses? Have you ever hired somebody that you've noticed? I have.
Not for that, no.
Craig Hill. How many people know who Craig Hill is? I was his customer. Because of his character, I made a conscious decision, okay, I'm going to hire you. And what he did was, I was doing flips and borrowing a lot of money from him, so I was his number one customer by far. There was an appraisal that came in that was stupid low. The house was worth 100, I bought it for 35, the appraisal came in at 60. They loaned 60% of that, I'm not getting any money back for repairs. So I said to Craig, can we just ignore that appraisal and just do the loan that I thought was going to happen? And Craig says, Bruce, not for you or anyone when I push an appraisal to do a loan. He risked the whole thing, right? No, he created a 25-year career at the Norris Group because I knew, son of a gun, this guy will be honorable no matter what. Well, for the last year, you know what? I haven't had to check on the billions of dollars of loans that we've done, ever, because that character's around. So when people own businesses, they watch. And somebody watched me running around like a nut. He said to me, do you work this hard every day? I said, absolutely. He says, why don't you work for me? I own an electrical wholesale place, and you'll call on stores like this. And so I said, okay. And that's what I did. Now, how does that relate to being a real estate investor? Well, interestingly enough, there are some things that happen. How many of you have ever bought REOs? I'm just curious. Okay, there's a process to that. So if you're an REO agent, do you probably have your number one investor already in place? Yeah. So what am I going to do? Should I come up and say, hey, you know what? Whoever you're dealing with stinks. I'm the best. Let me do it. Is that the approach, or that won't work? So how about coming humble? And here's why that related to the hardware stores. Hardware stores never change suppliers. Like Harry has called on that store for 40 years, and you're going to come over and kick him out, and you're going to be the new supplier? Not going to happen. So I'd go in and say, well, is Harry ever out of anything? I'll come on the opposite week, get his back order, so it's really humble. And then I was good at transitioning stores, and maybe in a little while I'd be the number one guy. That approach worked buying REOs. So I'd call up the REO agent, or the REO, actually I'd call the lender directly. I know you have investors already in place. Do you have anything that's just a mess? The worst property you have, you'd like to get an offer on. Sends me to a fourplex in San Bernardino. It's the most dangerous area I'd ever seen. While I'm there, literally as I'm driving, there's 3 kids beating up another kid, a teenager. I run my Bronco right at the group, toss the kid in the back of my car. I look to the right, there's 100 adults watching it happen. I'm going, I'm about to get shot. I go back, I make an offer, 40 grand for the fourplex. The lady at the lender says, oh, Bruce, that's, yeah, it's way too low. I'll go to the president and get you best counter I can. Everything I wanted to happen was happening because I wanted to teach her how I did business, because I wasn't interested in that fourplex. I was interested in 6 new houses they had in a row in Riverside, but I was setting a precedent of how I did business. I said, I tell you what, don't get a counter, go get an acceptance or rejection, because I never take counters. So she went to the 40 grand, we got her rejected, thank God, because I didn't want it. The next day, I went to the bank. I looked like this, I looked like a banker. I got past the guard, at the bottom that says you can't go. I get up top, now I'm upstairs in hollowed ground. And she comes out, she said, Bruce, we never meet anybody here. Well, I said, since I'm here, I'm glad you make an exception this time. Okay, so we sat down, so we talked about the fourplex, and I said, you have anything in Riverside? She says, I have 6 houses in a row. I said, oh, on this street? I know those houses. I'll pay you 75 grand for them. There was a pause. She said, Bruce, that's really a low offer. Comma, I know you won't take a counter. So I'll go to the president and see what I can do. Accepted offer. Wow. Yeah. That's how you short circuit, and that's how, by the way, how you borrow from what you already know and bring it to this industry. I knew I could not walk in and say, I'll take those 6 houses off the shelf. I had to prove to them, I'm going to drop what I'm doing, go see the crappiest place you have in San Bernardino, risk my life, and then teach you how I make offers and don't take counters. All that was accomplished in one thing because I did it in the right order. We did business for years after that, and I never had to counter any of my offers because I had already set the precedent. That's what I do, okay? So take what you already know. I never got in real estate until years later. I would work for this electric company for 6 years, and somebody said, you ought to go with me. I think you might be good at this house buying business. I had never done anything like that, so I went with them. We went into the house. He was there probably 5 minutes, and we got kicked out. Lady got ticked off, and we got kicked out. Get back to the car. When you observe something, you kind of pick up some things maybe that the person that's actually doing it doesn't. I thought the lady had actually said she would do the deal, and he talked himself out of it and got kicked out. So I said, I think the lady will sell your house. Let me knock on the door, get us back in. Knocked this door, I got us back in, we bought the house. So that was an aha moment for me. I don't know anything about real estate, but I understand why that worked. I understand somebody had cash, you had equity, you were motivated. I got it. I just got it right away, and I thought, okay, how do I go to work for this company that this guy works for? So I had to get a license. There was a 2-day class that you could take from Lumblow on a weekend. I took the class. Monday, I applied for the job. Sit in front of the guy that owns the company. How long have you had your license? 1 day. That's what he did. Yeah, this is no place for an inexperienced agent. You mind if I ask you a question? That's the most important sentence of my entire life, by the way. Do you mind if I ask you a question? How long does that take to say? 2 seconds? Okay. I always have no idea what I'm about to say next, ever. But the best of my whole life has always come next. I said, isn't the bottom line around here whether you can buy properties for a profit or not? He says, yeah. I said, you'll know in 30 days I can do that better than anybody you have. What did he have to lose, man? I had a full-time gig selling electrical stuff, by the way. Now, I was really quick at it, so I could get done. By 11 o'clock, I went to the office. They had no training at all. They had 5 other buyers, and you were supposed to sit there and wait for the 6th phone call to get your share of business. So did I do that? Did I wait? No. I call people constantly about a subject I knew nothing about. If you had an expired listing, I called you. I called 100 a day. When it was too late to call, I just mailed offers and pissed the whole world off. Because our formula was we were paying 65 cents on the dollar. So we got hate mail and everything. Guess what I did in the first month? I was the #1 buyer, and I bought 10 houses, and I will never know less about real estate in my entire life. And what I didn't know, and this was one of those aha moments for the owner, is I made an offer for, at the time, these were custom homes in Grand Terrace, and they were asking 100 or 220, I think, and I made an offer for 120, and they got accepted. And the owner of the company it blew his mind because all he bought was cruddy houses that needed tons of work. And now we have this cool brand new tract of houses. He couldn't believe it. He says, I'm going to pull you out of San Bernardino Riverside and put you in Orange County. I want to see if you can buy beachfront stuff. 3 days later, I'm negotiating an oceanfront place in Newport Beach. 1980. I'm 28 years old. I've got 40 days of experience. House is listed at $1 million. I'm offering $650. The doctor owns it. He has his lawyer there. They're not happy. I said, I'm just a messenger, man. I said, so argument ensued. That's the best price there is. Okay? Well, you got a 45-day escrow. We can't have a 45-day escrow. Have to have 10-day escrow. I said, I don't have any control of that, but I'll make a call. So I called, and I said, good news, we got $650 accepted. We need a 10-day escrow, not 45. So he asked me an odd question. He says, do they have a boat dock? I said, yes. He said, do they have a boat? Yes. And so he said, I'll give them the 10-day escrow. I just want their boat. So I hung up and I said, I got some good news for you. I got your 650. That's not what he wanted, but that's what, okay, I got your 650. I got your 10-day escrow. The only thing I need is your boat. And about 5 minutes later, after some excitement, a signed offer, I left the house with their boat. And when I went home that night, I went, how long has this been going on? I mean, honest to goodness, what is possible if you can ask? And man, I asked a lot. And that's what I learned, okay? Already went through that. Yep. Okay. While I was at the company, we had to go hear a seminar. I had never been to a seminar in my life. I didn't want any part of it. I thought it was a bunch of rah-rah stuff, and I didn't want to go. But I had to go. So I had to go listen to Jim Rohn. How many people know him? Yeah. This is the mentor that completely changed my life in 3 hours. I didn't want to be there, but we had a front table. It's like, oh, God, how long is this? 3 hours. Like, that's like 6 sermons, man. That's how I thought. This is a long time to sit here. My first note, I was impressed with him right away because I thought, you know what? I don't think he needs to be here. I don't think he needs anything from me. I like that. And my first note was, this guy doesn't need anything from us. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to take the next 3 hours seriously. So I paid attention. And I started writing notes. I have those notes to this day. And yeah, he changed my life. He taught me to write goals. Write goals as if they were going to happen. And he also taught me, very important, he says, go back in your life that one time that you were really angry. You can borrow that, and you can plug it into anything that you want. And wow, what a gift. Because I really hated Harold Pomeroy at that moment. I would love to borrow that and do some good with it. And so he taught me to do that. So I wrote goals. And goals are lies, right? That's what you do. You basically tell something it's already happened. And there were 3 big goals I wanted. I wanted to be a millionaire. I was about $1 million shy of being a millionaire. I wanted to get up in front of an audience and speak and leave to a standing ovation at least once in my life. And I was terrified of public speaking. And I wanted a black belt in karate like my brother. Those 3 things I wrote down. I wrote lots of things down, but those were the big ones. And I went to see this man. I wrote an 8-year goal to be a millionaire. And 8 years to the month, that happened. And I chased him down. And I showed him the chart, man. So that was cool. This is a story I love. Anybody know who he is? Jim Valvano was the coach of NC State. He came and replaced a coach named Sloan. Sloan was a very favorite coach. People went intentionally to that school to get taught basketball by Sloan, and now he's gone. So they have this guy. Oh my God. And he's not normal. So you're practicing, like the second practice he ever does, you come to the basketball practice. What's supposed to be there? Basketballs? No basketballs. He's got a ladder and scissors. And they spend the whole practice cutting down nets and swinging them over their head like a nut. Now, what does that signify in college basketball? You just won the NCAA championship. So after an hour of that, he told them, your destiny 3 years from now, when you are seniors, is we will swing those nets together and win the championship. And they did. You ever want to see a motivating documentary? Watch the last 10 games of that season where they won most of the games with a last-second shot and beat people and beat the odds. Incredible story, but that was planned 3 years before because those athletes had it in their mind that was their destiny, and they couldn't be defeated. Very cool. Okay. I worked for that company for 90 days, and the buying company, and then I quit my job, and I decided to do it on my own. And I had an interesting experience, and this is why I love to teach, because I think that you can enjoy this business and be the person that you want to be at the same time, and do the business in such a way that you can teach your kids the business and go, okay, I know we don't teach this stuff at home, but you have to be kind of a dirty guy to pull this business off. No, that's a bunch of bull. So I had an ad call from somebody that was in Orange County, I went to talk to the person, and I said, okay, I can pay you this much for your house. And he said, very monotone, that's fine. And I can have to have this long of an escrow, that's fine. I'd have to have you do a little work, that's fine. The hair actually went on my neck and went, it was all too easy and it was too fine. I said, you mind if I ask you a question? I said, are you okay? He said, he's surprised I asked. He said, no. And after Jim Rohn, I went to hear Ogmandino speak, bought 10 of his books. I said, I'm going to give these out. And so I said, hang on a second. Went to the trunk. I got one of the 10. And I said, I want you to read this book. I'm not going to talk to you about your house anymore. That's not a negotiating technique, by the way. I no longer cared about the house. I really didn't. I saw there was a bigger problem. And I said, it's a great book, but here's a chapter. If you're going to read just one chapter, read this chapter. It's called The God Memorandum, and it's about, you might have forgot this, but you're the greatest thing since sliced bread. That's what that chapter says. You ought to think about yourself in a different way. The next morning, I come back, and he opens the door, and he says, I want you to know that the book you gave me saved my life. I was going to sell you my house and kill myself. Wow. That is a wow. Yeah. So for the rest of my life in my career, I've looked across the table to see if they're okay. That's very important because sometimes they're not. If you're in a bad situation, is it maybe that you concluded you're never going to buy another house again? How am I going to do that? I've bought houses from, where are you going? Texas, great. I'll run an ad in Texas. I'll buy one for you. Hang in there. No kidding. So people give up and no, that's not how it works. It'll be okay. So this guy said, and he gave me, what do you call it? He gave me the reason for, he said, I'm going to sell you my house. And he said, that's fine because I realize what I need is a new start. And I realized, wow, we're in the new start business. And so I never forgot that. So that's a cool thing to understand, is that when you're sitting in front of somebody, pay attention. Things maybe are not okay for them, and maybe you can fix that. Hang around people who raise the bar in your life. I love the people I hang around with, the close friends that I have. One of them is John Stevenson. John Stevenson, he and I have been competitive for, 30 plus years. I used to sell him electrical stuff. I'd go to his house. And one day when I went to his house, he said, okay, you're not going to come here next week. I built a custom home. And so come there. Well, that was the first time I ever heard the word custom home. About a week later, my wife came home from a Bible study and went on and on and on about the house that it was at. Little male ego kicked in. I said, and we lived in a 5-bedroom, 3-bath, 2,800 square foot home where all the professors lived. I said, well, it's not as nice as our home, is it? There was a little pause. He said, well, Bruce, it's a custom home. Ooh. So now I'm big into goal writing. So guess what I write? I am walking through my new custom home. Do you know how long it took me to find the building lot to build that custom home that I would live in for 25 years?
24 hours.
4 hours. By noon, I called John Stevenson up. I said, do you know where Hawarden Street is? He said, yeah, it's the nicest street in Riverside. It's where all the doctors live. I said, that'll do. Now, that would have never happened if I wasn't spurred on by somebody that was in my life. I thought, if John Stevenson can build a custom home, well, yeah, I can too. And we never pulled negative for each other, but we spurred each other on. I took karate with him. When he got his blue belt before I did, no. No. It's on, pal. Okay. So when we were building the home, it was almost done. Now remember, I was the guy that got fired from 5 jobs in a row. And this is a new world for me. As they're finishing up the kitchen, there's 2 guys talking. I'm only 32 years old. And I live where the doctors live. And they asked, I wonder what this guy does. And it was such a cool moment because it's like, I don't get fired anymore, man. I'm flipping these houses. Okay. Once again, I never really thought about getting up and speaking in front of an audience. How many people know the name Jack Fullerton? Jack Fullerton was a big influence on me, but I attended a meeting, his meeting the first time, because I wanted to hear the speaker talk about mobile homes. I had traded for 5 mobile home lots. I had no idea what to do. There was a speaker at his club that was teaching about mobile homes. So I went there. The first thing Jack Fullerton said, let's say the night just started, he says, anybody that says they can buy homes cheap enough in California to immediately sell them for a profit is lying. And I'm sitting there going, well, that's the first, I'm at the first meeting and somebody's telling me I can't do what I already do. That's ridiculous. So I wait till the end of the meeting, so I'm alone with Jack Fullerton. And I said, Mr. Fullerton, I just want you to know that I do exactly what you say can't be done. And in the parking lot, there's a brand new 420 SEL gold Mercedes, and there's a Ford Fairlane. Now, guess who's I have the Mercedes. He's got the Ford Fairlane and is 10 times as rich as I am, and he doesn't spend a dime on anything that doesn't turn a profit. But he looks at my car and says, he just blows me off. So I get irritated. See, when I get mad, I'm really at my best. So what I do is I take 100 pictures of closed deals and document the numbers. And I send it to him. He calls me up, he says, you can speak to my club. I don't want to speak to your club, Jack. I just want to do this. You made me mad. But he said, no, I've never seen anything like this. So you got to come and speak to my club. I was like, oh my gosh. And so I decided, okay, maybe I'll do it. And the first thing I had to do is, well, why am I able to do this? Why am I able to buy at a discount? You know what my formula was? I see all kinds of interesting formulas. When I was doing this on my own for a long time, it was divide by 2. Almost anybody can do that. So if I was at an auction, same thing, by the way, I'll tell you this one story because this is important that you set a precedent for how you are viewed by whoever controls inventory. HUD had auctions back in the 90s. Their first one was 402 properties. How many properties do you think I saw? 402, every one of them, including one in Blythe that was 3 hours away. Why did I do that? Because I knew no one else in that audience would be as prepared as I. I knew it. Every property I looked at, I did a repair estimate, an appraisal, and circled my bid. On the 4th property, $85,000 house, opening bid 32 grand. I'm the only bidder. The HUD guy is over there, and the auctioneer looks at me and says, I know, what do you want to do? He said, well, just go to the next property. I'll go walk up to the guy. So the vice president of Latham Auctions comes up to me and he said, pal, we can't take 32. We got to have 65. I opened up my notebook. I had 10 cashier's checks. I said, I'm an all-cash buyer. I'm here to buy 10 properties today, but if you don't take that offer, I'm leaving. Guess what he did? He went, got my receipt, came back. 3 more times that day, one bid. He started to come down the aisle. I waved. He got my receipt. Now, if I had countered my first offer, wouldn't he have made it every time, all the way back? No, he would have come back and said, you can't get it for that original price. But I didn't give that option. So every property I bought was at the number that was ended. Now, the next day, I thought, I don't want an adversarial relationship with this guy. So I went and took him to lunch. And I showed him my work. He says, my God, you know more about these houses than we do. I said, well, if you have any questions, give me a call. So they started calling me with the cancellations. And he saw what I did. So literally, I was working from home still. I unclicked my thing, the notebook, pulled the page, sent them the fax. They sent my receipt, even if it was half of the offer of the bid. The next auction, I thought, I wonder if that happens during the auction. They have cancellations. So I got in a place where I could have both seats. One was empty. And sure enough, during the auction, they would send a runner and say, what do you think about 79? Click. Now, the reason they did that, if you're at an auction, what's the one thing everybody does? What did number 2 go for, 3 go for? Everybody knows what everyone went for. So what if they auction off a property in front of an audience and it goes for 50 grand less the second time? That's a devastating mistake because guess what? Everybody's going to cancel their deal. Well, heck with this. I'll say 50 grand and buy it back later. So they didn't do that. They did a runner next to me, sold it to me for the circled number, and no one knew that went on. That went on for years. Whoa. Yes, that's cool. Okay. Anyway, that all started with Jack Fullerton, and I started concentrating on, okay, well, why can I do what I do? And that's when we started teaching. Got a got a chance to write for A.D. Kessler's National Magazine, and I just had a heck of a good time. There was somebody that was promoting my seminars and said, God, if you could do a boot camp, like hands-on, show people what you do. Okay, and so I put that off for a year, and we finally bought a commercial building. Now, again, I'm a discount buyer. That's what I do. I never looked for a commercial building in my entire life. I go home Sunday night from San Diego. I open up the Riverside Press. There's a box ad. Commercial building was $350, now $250. And so I called that guy up. He comes to the building, and it's an A and B suite. I think, oh my God, this is perfect, because I'm thinking I could hire Craig Hill and have a hard money loan business and teach the boot camp on the other side 3 days a month. I'm just curious, why'd you go from $350 to $250? He said, I have a partner I can't stand. I said, and your offer is you're going to carry $250 for 3% for 20 years? It means you're going to share a check with this guy for the next 20 years. Is that what you really want? I said, why don't you guys take $5,000 a piece and just call it a day? He said, that sounds really good. So I bought the building for $85,000. Took over a $75,000 loan. When I did want to assume the loan, the only loan I ever wanted to assume, because I wanted to get a credit line with the bank. When I filled out the paperwork, the guy was startled at the purchase price. He says, is the building still there? I said, why do you ask that? He said, the guy bought the lot for $90,000 and built the building 3 years ago. I said, oh, well, good. Okay. Anyway, that's how all this stuff started. When you start a business, this book is really helpful, Good to Great. And it basically teaches you three things. What can you be the best in the world at? What are you passionate about? And is it economically profitable? And one thing that we did early on, I had started being invited to speak across the country, and my passion wasn't that. My passion was California charts. I could read the charts and tell you what was next. And I had to dumb down when I spoke to New York and Texas, because it's not what I knew. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to just stay in California, and we're going to write a course for California-only investors. And good luck with somebody coming in with their generalities and competing with us. And so that's what we did. And so we created a course that was really cool. In 1995, after 15 years of experience, I had something happen that was really interesting. A few years before, I had made a mistake in timing. I started building some homes in 1989. That turned out to be a peak market, but it was also a peak mood, right? I just knew everything I touched turned to gold. It was wonderful. And then a year later, got done with all those homes. I had bought a golf cart that held 8 people and a driver, because I knew we were going to have lots of interest and be driving these people around Palm Springs at these nice custom homes. No one ever got on the golf cart but me. I ran a full-page ad, not one call off a full-page ad in Palm Springs. So I learned how not to do something. So I had to get rid of all those properties. And a lot of the partners couldn't make their payments. So I woke up one morning where the builder left the country, and I had $21,000 more monthly payments in my life. $3,000 a house, times 7. Made every payment, resolved every problem. No investor lost a dime, not a credit problem ever. Why? Because this business allows you to make more money on demand. I got good at going to auctions. So anyway, I buy a house the same week I buy Aaron a car. He graduates from high school in '95. I buy him a Honda Civic for $15,700, and I buy a 3-bedroom house for $13,300. Now, what really scared me was the 3-bedroom house was on a national list for VA. So it went through the rent, and the house was already fixed and would rent for $500. It went through the whole list or there's a time period where only owner-occupants get to bid on it. Not one person in the country thought that was a good idea for $15,000. So then it goes to the investors, and I'm the only bidder in the country that think that's a good idea. Well, I just thought, well, how do you go from my attitude in 1989, where I think I'm building a $500,000 house, and I think it's probably going to be $550,000, and then it turns into $350,000. How do you end up having a 3-bedroom house less than a car? And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to get to the bottom of this and figure out who's figured this out. So I went to the library, and you have microfilm. I read every article written about real estate prices. If there was like a prediction of prices, I read it for 25 years, from 1970 to 95. Every article written in any national magazine, any newspaper. I was looking for the guy that said, this is how you predict stuff. Never found it. So I said, man, I don't know if it's possible, but I'm going to take it on. And so I spent the next 18 months, all I did was look at charts. I didn't even know what mattered. I would spend my time in libraries and I would handwrite all the data. So if it was affordability, handwrite it as far back as 1970 to where I was, 1995. And I would get all this data, make it into charts. And I didn't draw any conclusions until about 18 months later. So this is when I started this, by the way. I hope this doesn't turn it off, and this is here we go. So here I am writing this report right here in 95. 95 and 96. And this is the name of the report. California Comeback, Why Prices Will Double in the Next 8 Years. And there's the chart again. So did that happen? It went crazy. So it should have stopped here, and then it did this. So I realized, something's wrong here. Because I had looked at charts, and we had never been below a certain affordability. And now we were way below it. So I thought, okay, you either got it wrong or there's something wrong with what's going on. So we had a seminar where several hundred people were in the audience, and I had a lender that I was going to interview, and I thought it was going to be maybe a little bit of a long interview. It was one question, and I didn't know that until the answer. I said, I'm really curious, a stated income loan. So this is 2005. Stated income loans, where do you come up with a stated income number? And you know what she said in front of hundreds of people? We just make it up. And there was about a 10-second pause while I absorbed that. Yeah. This lady just said, we commit fraud on every loan and do not care. I said, okay, now I know why this has happened. So that's why we wrote this other report called the California Crash. Okay, there's the California Crash. So you go from this happy report. By the way, when you give a happy report, even if people think you're nuts by saying prices are going to double, they just like that you showed up. Can you imagine if I came here in 2006 and said this is going to crash? Because where were you in 2006 as far as mood of real estate? It was wonderful. Everything you touched turned to gold. You probably hug yourself every night. I'm so good at this. Everything I do. See, that's why I like charts, because I can make very unemotional decisions. Okay, I sold 100 properties in 2005. Because I could look at these charts and go, see y'all later. I'm going to cash this chips out, and I'll see you when it's on sale. Okay? That's why I love charts. It's not an emotional decision. I can get euphoric, but it gets countered by charts. Okay? All right. Let me go back and see if I missed anything I want. Partly what we did, and I won't spend a lot of time, is we also divided an education system around the charts. So quadrant 2 is when you're in a down market, and you do things differently, and you buy from different people, and there's a different skill set. So in quadrant 4 is when you start to have, you pass, quadrant 3 is a flat market, and then you start having a boom time, and that can be a very long time. When you go through quadrant 4, you're doing different things. Maybe you're building new homes, and you're speccing those and everything. So it's a very different skill set, because in here, you're typically buying directly from people. So if you're in the house buying business, you're running an ad, you're doing mailers and all that. If you're over here in quadrant 2, you're probably going to auctions. And you're not dealing with the people, you're dealing with people that control inventory. It's a very different skill set. So to know that difference, that was important, and that's why we put it in the education that we had. And by the way, getting out near a top is much more important than getting in at the bottom. Getting in at the bottom, it's very slow coming back. But when you don't get out of at a top, you can have a problem getting out at all. So we'll talk a little bit about understanding the quadrant. So quadrant 4 is when you're going up. And so it's the longest quadrant. All these happy faces. Yay! Okay, momentum's usually gradual at the start, explosive at the end. It starts attracting new participants, both buyer and seller. So if you have a club at the end of quadrant 4, you're crowded and everybody's a genius and it's great. Confidence grows when you're in quadrant 4. By the end of Quadrant 4, confidence can turn into arrogance. You know, you're taking risk on properties that's really not good, but it's harder to buy stuff, so you pay too much for it, and maybe say, well, you know, that mobile home on the dirt road's not all that bad, so I'll take a couple of those. Participants begin to discount the risk and attracts a lot less experienced people. In 2005 and 6, I had to have my hair cut by 4 people. I literally came in and went, well, where's Molly? Oh, she's flipping houses. It's like, uh-oh, that's bad. So it begins, Quadrant 4, which is where we were for a long time, it begins to reward less desirable real estate, and urgent buyers have to have one. So can you imagine in 2021 and maybe the first quarter of 2022 being a buyer trying to buy your family a home? How many of you guys were selling inventory at that time? It was nuts. It was great for the seller. It was crazy. We'd start a price out in Florida, a house that we were building thinking, oh, we're going to get, matter of fact, we just sold one yesterday. So it's still going on in Florida because of, they have a kind of a unique situation of so many people migrating there from wealthier states. We started that construction at we thought 370 was the number. Yesterday it went pending for 560. What kind of number is that? And that was yesterday. Now it only had 2 bidders. If that had been a year before, it'd have 12 bidders. And then you know what happens? You don't just sell one house. You sell 3 or 4 houses. The people that got beat, do you have another one? Well, it's under construction. I'll take it. So the crazy number that it got to on the back of, on one of them, it was 11 cash offers and 1 VA, no down. The VA drove the price all the way up to 577 and left us with 3 577 cash buyers on other houses at a number far in excess of what we thought we were going to get. That's Quadrant 4. Woo-hoo! And then it stops. It ends when the math no longer works, and that's called affordability. There's 4 endings to affordability. I'll cover it really briefly. By the way, how much time do I have? I need to kind of know.
3 hours.
No. I have a red eye flight, so I know that's not true.
20 to 25 minutes.
Okay. So here's our first time. How is that price damage? Does that look like price damage? Affordability is at 17. This is the price in the 80, 81, and 82. Any price damage? Any price decline? So let's talk about that just really briefly. Guess how much inventory there was for sale?
Plenty.
24 months. Guess what the interest rate was?
Plenty.
13.
Yep. I became an investor in 81. Now, I'm supposed to have good timing, but I went full-time in 81 and refied my 5-bedroom house where the professors live at 17 and a half. That was a good rate. Okay, so we've got 24 months of inventory. We have a 17% interest rate. We have a 10% unemployment. How do prices not go down? No, the affordability was history. So this is the affordability number, no price damage. This is the same affordability, price damage slightly. This is the same affordability number, price crash. Okay, so do you see, it's really important to understand the difference. So interest rates rising, does that hurt real estate prices in general? Yes. Really? No. Okay, so that's, and I'm being a little pain in the butt just because I want you to get used to trying this on your own. Don't take other people's word. I have a high school diploma, and everyone I've ever debated always has a PhD in economics. Well, all they have to do is look at 2 charts when they answer the question. Guess what interest rates were in 1974? They were 7.5, and when it was 1980, they were 15. Interest rates doubled. Do you know what happened to median price? It's tripled. Your interest rates doubled and your price is tripled. How is that possible? Part of it was inflation. But part of it, your starting point, you had a very high affordability when you started. And anyway, I can't go into all of that. I know about that. But here you have, if you talk about ratio, did you have 24 months of inventory? No, you had 9. Were your interest rates 17 or 15? No, they were 8. And your prices crashed. Why? See, it's really good to know the answer to that. I will talk about it in a second. So now here we are again, 17% affordability. price is completely crazy. So what's next is a really, really good question. Okay. When you go from quadrant 4, you go to quadrant 1, and all these things start to happen. I'm not going to go through that list by list. But one thing that happens is news is no longer positive about real estate. And that does play a part. You know, you start hearing bad things, and it sort of takes the mood down. And all of a sudden, these things that don't matter when you're got to have one matters. Condition starts to matter, location matters, distance starts to matter. And quadrant 1 is really a balanced market where seller and buyer almost don't have an advantage over each other. It's balanced. But it feels unbalanced because you're so used to people that are buying having to be competing with everybody. So this is a change, and it feels like a big deal, but it really changes in quadrant 2. Quadrant 2, by the way, had 4 visits to quadrant 2. Almost everything begins to matter a lot. So the price range, if let's say you're flipping, you have to be very careful about the price range, and the condition and the distance to work and all these things. All these tiebreakers start to matter, and prices begin to decline, and the power starts shifting to the buyer, and they know it. And you know it. When you're a seller, you know, you're like, hope somebody shows up this month to buy my stuff. All right. Quadrant 2, which is a down cycle, can last, it's the second longest quadrant, can last up to 7 years. And the buyer just basically decides, you know what, I may not want one at all. If you have builders in the mix, it goes from offering incentives to discounts to auctions. And when you get to auctions, that's the end of the game, because that wipes out everybody's deposit that bought a home in the first place. And you can have lots of foreclosures. We built 93 homes in Rosamond, carefully looking at charts. Rosamond is in like the middle of nowhere. 9 miles after Lancaster and after Rosamond, there's nothing. And we chose to build this, watching charts, we chose to build it and get done with it toward the end of 2004. People camped out to buy a house in Rosamond because it was quadrant 4, and they had to have one. And the prices went to $280. How many of you guys know Tony Alvarez? Yeah. Tony Alvarez, a friend of mine, he bought REOs there 3 years later. You know what he paid? Didn't pay $280. He didn't pay $80. He paid $40 for a 3-year-old house. And how did he buy it at $40? No one else in the world wanted it. When it was $280, you had people camping out. When it was $40, oh no, that's scary. Can't have one of those. See, that's why I like charts, because that takes the fear out. When you can buy a house for less than a permit and the land cost, the only question you have to ask is, are they ever going to build another house in Rosamond? Because if the answer is yes, that's got to be a winner long term. It's just got to be. Okay. So there's the chart of price damage for the 4 quadrants. 4 times we hit 17%. No damage, slight damage. That's when I got involved in all the auctions, crash, and we don't know yet. We're starting to head down. So there's a domino effect. So when you hit 17% affordability, and you can do that at any interest rate, what happens is, once you hit this number, you start having sales decline. That happens every time. Are sales declining in California? Yes. I mean, how bad are they? This is 240,000 sales annually, approximately now. So what's interesting, do we have any unemployment in real estate? No, it's interesting. No, we really don't. We have about a 10% price decline and a 45% volume decline. That sounds like the whole industry is making 50% less money, but we're still fully employed. So it's really interesting. That unemployment number means nothing to me. You know what's happening to the commercial world? There's pieces of that that's doing 15% of the business they used to a year ago. They're still fully employed, making 15% of what they made. If you're a lender, what was the basis? How much lending was refis in, say, a couple years ago? What percentage? Most of it. They're not doing anything. So I'm very suspicious of the unemployment chart being so wonderful because you have entire industries making 40 cents on the dollar than what they were. So that's a better thing to look at. What happens is your unsold inventory starts to grow normally, a lot. So this is crazy amount of inventory. This went up, slight price damage. Look at that, way less inventory, big price damage, and now, and we wrote a report last year, and it talked about the math when you hit that affordability number. If the interest rates really go up, you could have a very large price damage. And there might be, I mean, that's almost a certainty, except how many houses, let's just think about this. What ratio of homes that are available for sale are usually new houses in California? What ratio?
Like new construction?
New construction to existing homes is 15%. That's it. So 85% of the inventory you were counting to show up, there's a little problem with that. What kind of interest rate do they have on that? Do they have a 2 or a 3 or a 4? Yeah, they do. Most of the time, they have that interest rate. Yep. What's going to motivate them to put that house up for sale and get a 7?
Yeah.
So all of these charts point to the disaster, except for you're not going to have anything for sale. So you're going to do half of the volume, but you're only going to have a third of the inventory for them to bid on until you don't. So the longer this goes, the more you have to have an urgent pile of inventory. Is it going to come from foreclosures? Because that's what happens usually. So I'm going to go over because I'm running out of time. This is the most significant chart to tell you what's going to be damaging. So in the 80s, we had all those crazy numbers of inventory, 24 months, unemployment over 10, no price damage. Well, what happened? This blue line is the percentage, am I not hitting? There we go. This blue line is the percentage that of the inventory was trustee sales. 1 in 4. So if you're an appraiser and you have an REO that sells for 50 cents on the dollar, when it's only 1 in 4, you can ignore it and say, that's not the market. That's not what I'm going to dictate to the rest of the inventory. In the next cycle, it got to 40%. If you're an appraiser, you have to start paying attention to 4 of 10 comps being that number. It starts damaging the price, and that's what happened. This price decline was gradual as this thing got bigger and bigger, and you had more auctions. Look what happened in 2008. That green line was it was 70%. It was 7 and 10 comps. So I'm the flipping business in that year. A house that was $365,000, I buy for $65,000. And by the way, how do you do that? No one else bid on it. Yeah. It was missing a whole digit, $300,000 less. Was there competitive bids? No, everyone was scared to death. Why would you buy a house for $65,000? We'll wait till it's 10. I don't know. Permit, you look at the permit and you go, God, that's the deal of a lifetime. But we were in the flipping business. So we bought the house, add $20,000 to it, put it up for sale, have 25 offers the first day for $125,000, and the appraisal comes in at 85. And why is that? Because this number was 70% of the inventory. It dictated the appraisal. You were almost out of the flipping business because of that. And what happened was this caused the whole system to collapse because the appraiser was afraid that a review appraiser would come in. If he came in at 125, if they came in at 95 and said, no, that's wrong, that first appraiser would never get another assignment for the rest of his life from a lender. So he said, no, got to come in at 95. Well, you just devastated an industry. Great. And so that's why prices declined so bad, because the comps were almost 75% lender-owned properties going for nothing. Now, if you have a chart, you can look at that and go, that's the sale of a lifetime, and I don't have to be in the bad mood that most people are in. That's why I like charts, because you can look at that and go, this is the deal of the century. All right. So now we went crazy and got to about $900,000. I think we're now at about $760 on a month-to-month basis. I'm going to go to something I call moodometer. So this is something that we created ourselves, and I did this because I wanted to be able to play with it. I can add numbers to this and I can see how it changes. So this kind of mimics the affordability number. So this is what percentage of your income is necessary to qualify for buying the median price home at any given year. Now, this is the capacity. So in this, all of this list, we've reached capacity just a few times. But if you reach a capacity once, couldn't you reach it all the time? Why don't you do that? See, that's why, like, this is called a moodometer for a reason. It's the mood of the participant that changes. That's why you can have a 365 Moreno Valley house where everyone wants it in 2005 and they'll bid up it to death. Then you can have it for 65 grand 3 years later and no one wants it. What's the change? Fear. So this is basically charting the history of the mood of the participant. So what's fun about that is how many times are we over 40% since, say, 2007? Very much? No. So just for fun, let's play with what that does to price. I'm going to go down here real quick. If you're in a 40% mood, which is better than normal, and you're making $83,000 and your interest rates are 7, instead of a median price at, say, 750, this is where you would be at. Does that scare you? Yeah, it should scare you. Because mathematically, that is exactly where you should head. What is preventing that? No one's building much of anything. I can tell you that I would rather be in Florida because of who migrates there. People with more expensive states migrate to Florida with cash. They sell something in New York with a loan, can buy a better house in Florida with no loan. So it doesn't matter what interest rates did. That's why I'm in Florida. Made that decision. California loses now, what, 400,000 people a year? But they're not building any new homes. Do you have more inventory than you need? No, your inventory is very low. So right now, everything's okay. You guys are maintaining a price that should not exist because your mood is still having to be in this range. And so far you're there. But historically, how long do you stay there? You just don't. Matter of fact, how low can it get? What if you really hate real estate? You're scared to death. It goes below 30. And you know what's interesting? When it goes below 30, like if you're a PhD in economics and I debate you, you're like, oh, God, it was a deal of the century. Really? What was the volume like? The volume of sales stunk because fear reigned. Matter of fact, what did we have to do to get you to buy one? In 2005, we couldn't stop you from wanting it at 365. At 65, what happened? We had to give you $8 grand credit to buy it. And you still didn't want it. That's why I like charts. I can make decisions that are counter the mood. I can sell when everybody's happy, because this is easy. Are we too happy?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, you can have my stuff. It's just that easy. I can sell it. You'll have 50 bidders. I'm gone. I'll see you later when you hate it. That's pretty simple. You don't have to be a genius. You just look at this and go, I get it. What I like about it is that we can play with things in the future. You say, well, we're going to get raises. Okay, so let's plug in. You got a $7 grand raise, so now make that 90. We can play with that. We can see what that does. But historically, what I know is a human being does not stay here. We go somewhere here. That is being prevented right now by all the people that are in place that can stay there at 2 or 3 or 4% mortgages. What would be the catalyst for them not to stay? Job. That's right. That's the big kicker. Are you going to have a job? So we're going to write another report, and it's either going to be a lost decade or 1% mortgage rates. And I haven't decided the ending, and I never do until I'm done with all the report. But I think it's going to be one or the other. I think you don't have a choice. As a matter of fact, this week has really been interesting, right? Do you understand what happened? So when you when you have a bank and you have billions of dollars, you put it in the safest spot possible. Let's say you bought a bunch of 10-year T-bills. You're paying your depositor 0.1% and you're getting 2% on a 10-year T-bill. That spread is amazing. You did great until interest rates go to 4. And the auditor comes and looks at your books and said, I'm just curious, are you calculating the value of your billions of dollars of 10-year T-bills at face value or discounted value? Why does it have to get discounted? Well, what if you had to sell your 10-year T-bill, it was only 1 year old, and it pays only 2, and now the market is 4? Would that be a discount? Yep. A slight discount? A big discount. And you have $20 billion of that? That's a problem. That's what happened. They sold a bunch of those and lost $2 billion, and that started a cascade of, oh my God, I got to get my money out, and 3 days later, second biggest bank failure in the country ever happened. And that set off another chain reaction. So what's the deposits? What's the size of deposit that's guaranteed? Is that true now? It is not true now, because 96% of the depositors within that bank had more than that money. So that would have been a cataclysmic event. So the Fed said, you're good. So can you back off of that? See, that's the problem. Once you start setting a precedent, that's what's dangerous right now, is that all of these things are like, how does this play out? Because you know how the easiest solution is? So all the rest of the banks have the same problem. They've got all these 2% 10-year things. What would be the solution tomorrow that you could get it be okay? You change the interest rate. Drop the interest rate down to 2. You're on par. Perfect value. You're good. Now we're screwed though. We got inflation and now at 2%. Yeah, but what's the worst thing? Do you crash the monetary system or put up with inflation? Not supposed to do either, by the way. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody gets fired because this shouldn't have occurred. But here we are, and now we're in an exaggerated world where, okay, wow, we're guaranteeing you have $1 billion instead of 250, you're good. That's not supposed to be happening, so that's a big risk. And all of a sudden, that one lender exposed the whole world of lending is in the same boat. So, I mean, they've really got some big decisions to make, and it'll happen pretty quick. So, enjoy the next couple of weeks, because this is serious stuff. Am I done?
Yeah, you're done.
I'm done? Okay. By the way, can you give them these? You can give them this presentation.
Okay, so Bruce says that we can have his presentation. Who would like it? All right, absolutely. So guys, let's give him another round of applause.
Thank you, guys. That was so fun. Thank you.